Before moving away now from div elements and moving on to margins, it's worth mentioning two very important properties that can be declared for any element, width and height. These may seem obvious, but these two properties are essential for setting specific heights and widths of your elements. The first time you notice that elements are expanding widthwise to fit their containers and height-wise to encompass their content, you'll start to realize that in some instances the control you need is missing. So you'll want to use the width and or height rules here in the CSS rule definition for this div tag to regain this control. Notice that values can be given as pixels, points, inches, centimeters, millimeters, and so on. These values are lengths. You can also use percentages or even use an automatic setting. I'll talk more about the latter two, percentages and automatic settings, a little bit later in the course. You'll notice, however, when using your div elements that these values can be influenced adversely by other rules within the style sheet and also by the HTML elements that they might contain. Remembering the box model that I introduced you to earlier, any of these settings here can adversely affect either width or height, including the padding, borders, margins, and missing from this diagram is any content that's in those divisional elements. In closing, I should state that most modern browsers support the declaration of minimum, referred to as min width, and maximum or max width and height values, which you may need when working with unpredictable content. But the occurrence of div elements in Dreamweaver that seem to grow and shrink and expand and contract without much predictability can become a problem until you really have a good sense of the various CSS rules that can dictate these widths and heights. So I recommend starting, at least for my students, that they start with absolute type positioning here. Going with the fixed, relative, or static tends to make these a little bit more unpredictable in terms of width or height. You will have need in some cases for these other types of positioning elements, but I generally start off with having my students stick with the absolute type of positioning, at least until they start to get a sense of being able to predict why their widths and heights are changing the way they do. This also includes a solid understanding of the other building block components of CSS, represented again by this diagram. So let me now move on to the next movie and talk about the margin property and how it's used to declare the margin between an HTML element and those elements outside of it.